What's up everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is Damio Motorized. Today we are embarking on a project that has been burning a hole in my brain for a hot minute. It's massive, it's thrilling, and it's gonna push me to my absolute limit. You might be wondering, what in the world is this guy trying to do? Well, let me tell you, I'm trying to build a supercar replica. Baby, yo, a supercar replica. And not just any supercar, I'm talking about a Ferrari supercar. Yo,
wow!
You heard that right, a Ferrari supercar. Don't be surprised, I'm all about pushing the boundaries and challenging myself to build my spirit car. Yo, I mean my dream car. So buckle up everybody, it's gonna be a wild ride. Let's get started. Firstly, I consider the chassis measurement of the Ferrari 488 GTB replica, which is the model I am replicating. After conducting research, I found out that the Ferrari 488 GTB has the following dimension, which is: firstly, the length is 4,568 mm, the width is 1,952 mm, the height is 1,213 mm, and the wheelbase 2,650 mm. Due to the limited tools and resources, some of my measurements may not be entirely accurate. However, I have done my best to replicate the dimension as closely as possible. With this measurement in mind, I began working on replica chassis. As you can see, I used a 1.5 mm steel pipe, which I cut according to the measurement I researched. The next step is I shaped the chassis and then move on to the welding the pieces together. After completing the chassis welding without reinforcement, I move on to creating the suspension armrest. To do this, I cut iron tube to the required length. I measured each tube to ensure they were all 1 foot long, and I needed 4 of them. Once I had cut all 4 tubes, I welded them on the chassis together to form the suspension armrest. Now that you can see the progress I've made, let's move on to the next step. After completing the suspension rest and reinforcing the chassis, I'll be working on the front suspension arm. Yeah, to begin, I need to position the wheel in their respective places to get an accurate measurement of the suspension arm length. Once the wheels are in place, I can measure the length of the suspension arm to determine how long it needs to be before connecting it to the wheel spindle. After welding one suspension arm, I decided to connect it to the spindle. I still have 3 more suspension arms to weld together to complete the setup. After completing the suspension arms, I moved on to the lower part of the suspension. I decided to create a bushing setup, but without using a real bushing. Instead, I chose to use a thick 2-layer washer to serve as the bushing component, which I know is inefficient. After welding and fabricating the suspension arm, I decided to mount it to the spindle. However, before doing so, I needed to modify the suspension arm to fit perfectly onto the spindle. To achieve this, I cut a piece of metal, drilled it, and then attached it to the spindle, ensuring a secure and proper fit for my desired outcome. After successfully installing and connecting the suspension to the spindle and wheel, I proceed to mount the steering rack onto the chassis. To secure the steering rack in place, I cut and welded iron components together, creating a sturdy support system that enabled the steering rack to stand firmly on the chassis. After mounting the steering rack, I decided to mount the suspension. I took a bold step and designed my own suspension type for the chassis. I designed a suspension system for the front aspect of the chassis. Although I was unsure if it would work, I decided to test it. Maybe my design would absorb shocks well, but unfortunately, it gave me a result I didn't want. After the suspension design didn't quite work out, I decided to focus on the real meat of the project, the differential axle. This is where things get really important. I started by cutting the iron for the links that would connect the differential axle to the chassis. I chose to use tubing iron for the links, which would provide the necessary strength and durability. With the links taking shape, I began to assemble the differential axle, carefully connecting it to the chassis. This was a crucial step as it would determine the overall stability and performance of the Replica supercar project. After successfully mounting the downlink, I shifted my focus to creating a support system for the rear absorber system. I had planned to use two types of absorber for this project. The first type is a hydraulic absorber, which was showcased in the video. The second type, which will be added later, is a spring plus hydraulic absorber. This combination will provide a more comprehensive suspension system. With the design plan in place, I began by welding an L-shaped iron piece. Once the welding was complete, I welded the support system onto the Ferrari Replica chassis. After completing the rear axle link installation, I decided to revisit the front chassis area to correct the steering rack system. Since the steering rack was originally designed for the left-hand drive vehicle, I am now working on modifying and installing it to fit the right-hand drive configuration of the chassis. After correcting the steering rack, my next step was to install the steering wheel. To do this, I cut a long iron rod to form the steering wheel stand and I welded it to the chassis. After correcting the steering rack, my next step was to install the steering wheel. To do this, I cut a long iron rod to form the steering wheel stand on the chassis and I welded it to the chassis. I then added bearings to enable smooth rotation of the steering wheel. Following that, I welded the universal joints to the iron rod, creating a secure and sturdy connection that allows for precise turning. Next, I move on to one of the most important steps, installing the engine on the chassis frame. To begin, I fabricated an engine mount which would serve as the foundation for the engine to sit on the chassis. I started by welding 4 pieces of square pipe, each less than 1 foot in length and width, together to form a sturdy base for the engine mount. After mounting the engine on the engine mount base, I added brackets made from drilled and trimmed flat iron. This bracket allowed me to secure the engine in place using bolts and nuts without directly attaching them to the engine itself. Finally, I welded the bracket to the engine mount. After completing the engine mounting, I proceeded to install the differential axle second link. Firstly, I drilled a hole in a thick flat steel iron plate. Next, I welded the drill iron plate to the chassis body. Finally, I connected the link to the drilled iron plate using a bolt and nut, securing it firmly in place. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you're enjoying this project build. If you have any question or comment, please leave them in the section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more DIY project and updates. See you in the next video, guys.